Hi, welcome to the roundtable on the state of data ops and the modern data stack with Glenn Solomon, Matt Turck, and Venky Ganesan. Glenn's a partner at GGV Capital and has invested in plenty hyperscale companies, including Square, Slack, HashiCorp, and also data stack companies such as Monte Carlo, People.ai, and Unravel Data. We also have Matt Turck here with us, who's a partner at Firstmark Capital and is also very active in the data space with companies such as DataEQ, CockroachDB, ActionIQ, and many more. He's also the author of the popular Mad Landscape, which stands for Machine Learning, AI, and Data. It's his annual blog that is now becoming the go-to spot to go and check out everything that's changing in the modern data stack. And last but not the least, we have Venky Ganesan here, who's a partner from Menlo Ventures and has invested in several iconic companies, including Redfin, Palo Alto Networks, Poshmark, and is also a very active investor in data companies, including Icera and Unravel Data. Thank you all for joining us at DataOps Unleashed. It's incredible to have the three of you here together today to share your insights on data ops in the modern data stack.
Thank you for having us.
Now, your companies are both users and creators of the modern data stack. They are either crunching massive amounts of data and converting them into insights, or they're helping other companies do that at scale. And you could say that now every company is becoming a data company, and these data pipelines, AI, machine learning models are creating very big strategic value for these companies. And these companies are depending on them more than ever before. Now, while the advantages of becoming data-driven are becoming more clear, what's often hard to grasp is what's changing in this landscape. Why is it changing? And what it means for the consumers of this technology. And that's what we hope to uncover here today, given your unique vantage point. So Glenn, maybe we'll start off with you. What do you see as the biggest business and technological trends that are affecting this modern data stack?
Thanks, Kunal. It's great to be here. And Matt, Venky, looking forward to the conversation. Kunal, I'd say, let me highlight a couple of big trends I'm seeing out there. First, as you rightly point out, more and more companies want to be data-driven. That stems from being software-driven, which is just creating a massive amount of data. Now the question is, what do you do with it? So just, I think at base level, first thing we're seeing is a tremendous pull from companies across every industry, across the globe, really of all sizes, wanting to become more data-driven. That's great for us. That means that there's a lot of opportunity to invest in companies that are building platforms and products and tools for these companies. But this is a really big trend, and I think we're in the very early innings of it. So I expect this to go on for quite some time. And again, it's global, so it's particularly exciting. I'd say second, there is large investment getting made in kind of core storage and compute centralization. Obviously, Snowflake is a big beneficiary of that, as is Databricks and data warehousing products from many of the cloud vendors. I think this is creating interesting downstream effects and opportunities for startups, and also starting to set rules of the game for how companies who are consuming data infrastructure products, how they're thinking about building their stacks. Another thing I'd mention is the shortage of talent. And I know we're going to talk more about that, but it's very difficult to on your team to amass the kind of talent you need to really effectively both manage the data and then ultimately evaluate and analyze it for good purpose in your business. And so again, that creates opportunity for companies that are building products to take the place of people. There's a lot of complexity, however, that comes from all this. And I don't think companies are nearly as advanced as the modern data stack would, if you read about modern data stack, you're likely to believe. Most companies are in the very early innings of trying to figure out how to manage data. We see that even in, our born digital companies, the Open Doors and Airbnbs of the world, Squares of the world, where these are companies I've involved with and have been involved with in the past. And, this is not an easy game even for them. And so it's certainly not easy for, companies in other industries. But the will is there. It's just that we're very early. And the complexity is compounded by the fact that there's a lot of noise in the startup universe. There are a tremendous number of companies that are participating along, kind of every step in the journey in the DataOps stack. And so kind of figuring out how to rationalize all the opportunity that's out there to invest and ultimately come up with the decisions you want to make as a company is difficult and challenging. So I think this best of breed versus platform balancing act that companies have had to go through in software is also going to happen in the data stack. Those are a couple of things I'd highlight.
Glenn, a lot of noise. Matt, obviously your mad landscape keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. How are you seeing this modern data stack evolve?
Yeah, so I think that was a great overview by Glenn. Just to double click on one of the points, for me, absolutely the big driver is the rise of modern cloud data warehouses and the lake houses as well. So for me, that's been the big unlock in the space. And it's sort of ironic when you think about it, because we've been talking about this for big data. I guess the cool kids don't talk about big data anymore, but we've been talking about this big data thing for many years now, since the days of Hadoop, the mid 2000s, and there's been tons of conference and all the things. And I fast forward to 2022, and we effectively just at the point where we finally able to actually store data. So for all the blog posts and the tweets and the conferences of the product and the investment and all the things, so we finally at that base level in the data hierarchy of needs, where okay, well, all right, we can take all this data, we can put it somewhere, and we can actually process it at scale, right? So 15 years to get here. But this has changed everything, because now that you have the base layer of the data hierarchy of needs sort of sorted out, now you can start focusing on a bunch of different things, right? So some of it is better analytics, and there's a whole trend around, okay, well, there's metric stores and the possible reinvention of BI. There's the whole reverse ETL world, which is trying to pull data out of the data warehouse and put it back into some applications, right? That whole thing. Then there's the separate world, for now, separate world of machine learning and AI, which has been waiting for this core need to be fulfilled to truly accelerate. So it sort of unlocks everything. Also we're going to talk about it, but unlocks DataOps, because okay, now this whole thing is becoming very real, no longer experimental, but it's now the whole thing needs to work. So it really matters. But that's for me, that's the big driver.
Thank you, Matt. Venky?
Well, sort of great comments by both Glenn and Matt. So I'm trying to think about what would be incremental. So I guess I would say 3 incremental things, right? Everything already said before. One is the value of data is not new. I'm going to age myself, but I remember in the 1990s about how Walmart was considered such a leading, because they were using Teradata to do real-time pricing and inventory. There was this big innovation, right? So there's notion that if I get the data right and make decisions based on data, I can create incredible value. This is not new. It's been around. Bloomberg built, $25-30 billion business just on the notion of getting data to that. So this is not new, but what has changed is that when you add data with AI, so that's the second thing I'd say. Value of data is not new, understood, but it just got accelerated one more level, because what happens is AI and a lot of AI techniques got into real prominence in the 2000s and got into this. You cannot do AI without data. Most practitioners will tell you, right? The one with the most data wins, because the AI today is good enough. The differentiation is not going to be in the algorithms. It's going to be in, did you collect the data? Do you organize the data? So to me, the world of AI is driven by the ability to have the right data infrastructure. That's another sort of, I think, inflection point. And the third inflection point I'd say is that the digital transformation that was happening and is happening just got super accelerated by the pandemic. And because of the acceleration of the pandemic, all these analog business processes were digitized. And now that they are digitized, they can be tracked, stored, analyzed, evaluated, and acted upon. And to me, that's a third driver that's like, this is not new. You need data for AI, but all this digitization happening through the pandemic has just turbocharged all of these things. So for all these reasons, I think the data stack has got to be the prominence of one of the most important stack in a company, because your success long-term is going to be based on how good is your data stack, how good is your data ops, and then how do you build the analytics on top of it.
Thank you. So I think what Matt said there is the new data processing that Venky, you were referring to, is now no longer a science project. It's becoming mainstream. People are actually deploying it. Businesses are starting to depend on it. So I guess the next question would be like, what trends are you seeing develop within the data ops practice itself? And this one we can start off with Matt.
Yeah, so data ops is one of the most exciting and vibrant categories of the whole data technology world these days. And that's a direct consequence of what we were just discussing, which is, you know, this is no longer a science project. This is, all of this is getting into production. And interestingly, not just for analytics, but for a lot of like data-driven applications that are in production and depend directly on the quality of the data. So suddenly the whole like data stack within the enterprise really matters. Like the thing needs to work and needs to be reliable, because you got, you know, millions and millions of dollars on the line if the thing doesn't work. So now like people are looking around for tools and platforms and systems to make sure that the whole thing works, scales, is reliable. And that has resulted in an explosion of activity in data ops. So DataOps is a little bit of a, you know, like one of those informal sort of terms that means lots of different things. But like for me, it includes the world of data quality, which has been very vibrant, which is really like, okay, is your data good or bad, right? And within that, you got different approaches. You got the companies that are more like declarative, like the superconductive / great expectations of the world. You have companies that are more machine learning driven, like, you know, Menlo and others. Then you have the parallel world of like data lineage, which is, okay, well, like we need to understand if there's a data quality problem, where it comes from. You need to like go up the, you know, the chain, like the DAG, to figure out whether, you know, where that comes from. So there's companies that do that. Then there are companies trying to like merge those two concepts into an overall concept of data observability, which is a little bit of like all of the above. And then you have like the data orchestration companies, which have been also getting a lot of momentum. You know, like Astronomer, which is like the company working on Airflow, or Daxter, or Prefect. You know, and they solve a different problem in DataOps, which is the orchestration of like, okay, the assembly line of data needs to work, right? And if there's a problem, you need to like be able to stop the chain, or like restart it, and all the things. So it's if you look at the new startups and the funding and just like the energy in this space, DataOps is super interesting and fun. And I'm not even mentioning like stuff that's on the side of DataOps, like data access, you know, catalogs and governance, and but you know, ultimately I think everybody understands that there is a, you know, one of these huge like juicy opportunities, which is effectively to be the data dog of data, right? The irony being that data dog, even though it's called data, is like in a different part of the world, which is like DevOps. But like there's an opportunity to build, you know, I don't know where Datadog is currently, but last time I checked, they were a $50 billion market cap company. So there is an opportunity to build that company in the data space. And I think a lot of founders and a lot of VCs see the opportunity, and certainly a very exciting one.
I completely agree there, Matt. Could not agree more on that part. Venky, anything to add there?
I would, but can we just do it, because I have someone rang the doorbell. I just want to go answer. I'll come right back. Okay.
Go. Venky, anything to add?
Yeah, I thought like Matt laid out an amazing sort of infrastructure on this. I would say the biggest trend I'm seeing is kind of like pushing this to getting this data workloads to the cloud. And I think it's a really interesting game changer, right? Because again, a little bit of history here. A lot of this data revolution started with Hadoop, on-premise, MapReduce. And I think one of the things we're seeing now as we move to the cloud is suddenly you can separate out the storage and compute, have the infrastructure handle it. and then have the data warehouse, which is a Snowflake, a Databricks. And to me, this is a game changer because it now allows you to not have to worry about the piece of storage and compute. Let the cloud people take care of it so you can focus on this. Now, there are new sets of problems that come into play around DataOps when you move the data to Snowflake or Databricks or any of the cloud providers thing, which is that you need to still understand the workloads. You need to optimize for them. And I think there are room for new players because what happens is that, and this is one of my own learnings, I thought the cloud will be vertically integrated. You will do everything in the cloud, and then you will just take the dominant, like I remember when Redshift came out, I was like, well, Snowflake has no chance. Redfish is, Amazon is smart. Why don't you just run it with Redshift? But if you actually analyze the economics of the cloud provider, they make a lot of money on the storage and compute. And the EMR rep, the AWS rep and the Azure rep doesn't really care what you run on, as long as you run on their storage and compute, because they make a lot of money. In fact, it's from a gross margin, it's very efficient for them. So, and the end user doesn't want to be completely captive because then they're locked into the cloud provider. And so my learning was that people love going to the cloud for storage and compute, but they're not necessarily going to take the captive services because they don't want to be locked in. Whether they move it or not is a different question. They just psychologically don't want to be locked in. And that's why I think, like, personally, I missed how big I think Snowflake is a better product, but I just thought, man, even if it's a better product, people will just stick to the native cloud solution. And that's not true. And it's the same thing for that reason. I think there's going to be a whole DataOps category that helps you both migrate workloads to the cloud, but also monitor it. Because you can't have the fox guard the hen house. You need some third party there to help you make sure that, one, you're optimizing the workload, because the cloud provider is not interested in optimizing the workload for efficiency. Neither is Snowflake or Databricks or anyone else, because they all get paid on a compute basis. So you need a third party to do it, which also means that if you have that, it helps you migrate, but also helps you if you want to migrate from one cloud to the other and you want to go to the hybrid world. If you don't have a third party doing it, you won't have that independence. So that's a big trend I see.
It's always going to be multi-stack, multi-system, multi-cloud, and the data ops complexity, just does not go away. Glenn, anything more to add there?
Yeah, just maybe zooming out a bit from Matt's definition of data ops. A driver that I'm seeing accelerate and gain momentum is quite simply just the need for speed in organizations. Like there's a tremendous amount of momentum that we see around real-time streaming, real-time analytics. Companies are growing the number of business processes for which they want real-time data to make decisions. And that is having like a big impact on this whole world. There's a bunch of startups that I think are doing really cool things in these areas. And some of the bigger, more established companies are driving their way towards more and more real-time capability, more focus on streaming. So that's one big trend. And I think it's we're only going to see more of it in the future. Another trend I'd point out in data ops is the rise of open source and the impact open source is having on many areas within the data ops world. If maybe some would disagree with this point, but to me, it looks like Kafka has had like a massive impact on streaming as a result. And what it shows to me is that open source, and we see this in other open source businesses we're involved with outside of the data world, is that open source can really standardize markets. It can standardize technologies and standardize workflows, and kind of I talked about complexity before, right? Lots and lots of vendors. Well, open source can work in the reverse way to kind of create a standard that companies have to work around. And I just think we'll see more open source. There's lots of open source companies. birthed in this area, and many are gaining traction. And we'll have to see how this all plays out. But I think open source, when it works well, is a very, very powerful trend.
I just want to build on one thing Glenn said, because I think it's spot on. The open source, to me, the other interesting element, like I think open source can sometimes really open up a market and create demand. It can unlock demand. And then someone can come and be a fast follower behind the open source player and make a really bulletproof commercial version. So to me, like one of the amazing things about open source is that it can create and unlock markets that you were not sure, and also create opportunity for someone to build a really bulletproof commercial version to either complement the open source version or even supplant it, right? Like I think for Snowflake, the fact that Redshift was already out there kind of validate the market, train people, and then they could just come and say, I am significantly better, I'm performant, and get traction. So to me, it's like two factors. The open source itself might be the right play, but you can also think of that as unlocking the first version, and then you build on top of it.
Great insights there. So data ops, the need is only going to increase. Venky, we'll have this next question for you. So you mentioned cloud technologies, and you mentioned people going from on-premise to the cloud. And Matt pointed out earlier that cloud ultimately and finally, after 15 years, provides us the storage layer to help pack all of this massive amounts of data out there. But Venky, if you think about it from a business perspective, why move to the cloud? What are the risks of not moving to the cloud? And does it ever make sense not to move to the cloud?
Well, so let's start with why you want to move to the cloud. And what is the biggest impediment to moving to the cloud is, I think there's a combination of, I got to move the data. Now, if you're already born in the cloud company and your data is already in the cloud, then this is not an issue, right? But that's only the newer companies. The vast majority of companies and the vast majority of data kind of starts not in the cloud, at least for now. But that's changing because a lot of the newer companies are already born in the cloud, so it doesn't matter. I think if you are a company that has its data on-prem, you just have numerous number of issues. One of the things is on-prem is very heterogeneous in hardware, heterogeneous in environment. And in a world of labor shortages, what happens if you don't have the people? If you have the kind of turnover you're seeing, can you get the people to manage it? Will your on-prem vendor continue to support it? So if you're on there, let's take an example, you are on Cloudera. Well, what happens if Cloudera gets end of life? And if you look at some of the big on-prem vendors, whether that's an Oracle or a CA, when they end of life their product, they actually charge a tremendous amount of money. Like most of the revenue is because you have lock-in. And so to me, for all those reasons, like the trend is very clear. The human capital trend is very clear. So if you don't move to the cloud, you're going to be trapped in an island with less and less resources that cost more and more. So to me, that's the business imperative for you to move. Now, will it happen today? Do you have to move it today? No. But you need to move it in the next 4 or 5 years and have a clear plan. So the thing is, you got to think about, how am I going to do it in a responsible manner? How do I migrate it? And then you don't want to migrate in a way that you're locked in a new place. Part of the reason why you're migrating from on-prem is you don't want the vendor lock-in. So you want to migrate it with a way that you can understand and know that if, again, you need to move, you can think through that. So to me, those are the reasons why you have to. Now, I'm just focused now on vendor lock-in, but I actually think the most important thing, why do we have data? We have data because you want to get insights from it. Data that doesn't result in insight. And so to me, part of moving it to the cloud is one, it gives you an opportunity to standardize it, think about the data you want. And then once you move it to the cloud, you can unlock new generations of AI technologies that come into the cloud, TensorFlow, pick it, that then allow you to get more insights from it. And so to me, eventually data is worthless if it doesn't translate into insight. Your best way of getting that insight is to figure out a scalable way of moving it to the cloud, cheaper, and also unlocks a lot of the new AI techniques to get insights from it.
That's very well said. Glenn, anything to add there?
I like the framework that Venky lays out as to why move to the cloud. And I think there's you asked the question, Kunal, is there any data that things that won't move to the cloud?
Right.
And I think we're on a continuum. We're on a path where, you know, there are still lots of companies, many large companies who are reticent to move all their data to the cloud. I think the view is, hey, you know, we have regulatory obligations, and there's risk if we, you know, if we don't manage things ourselves, is a primary inhibitor. But I would say that if you look at SaaS applications as a you know, a clue for what might happen and how that whole world has evolved, more and more compute workloads have moved. And I think the same is going to be true of data over time. And data that is viewed as too sensitive, too risky, too valuable to move to the cloud, it's just a matter of time. The solutions and the you know, the value that can be driven from having data up in the cloud are just too many. And companies are ultimately on a path to having more and more of their core data living in the cloud. Now, I think, you know, so in my mind, the question becomes, if you believe that, which I do, like, okay, what are the challenges and problems that come from that? And this is where, you know, I have to give you some props, Kunal. I think you guys have at Unravel have seen this coming from a mile away. And as Venky mentioned, right, you've got to, how do you safely move data into the cloud? And then once it's there, how do you manage the applications that consume that data in a way that is rational? Because as Venky rightly points out, I mean, there isn't going to be a lot of governance. Like the cloud vendors are going to want you to use their services. And if you want to use them rationally and use them the right way, and in a cost-efficient way, then you really do need other tools to make sure that, you know, things don't run away from you. And this is where I think you've had great insight, and where I believe Unravel adds a ton of value.
We're definitely seeing a lot of data move to the cloud. Matt, anything to add there?
Yeah, you know, it's been really interesting because I'm on the board of a couple of companies doing, you know, machine learning and that type of thing, like specifically DataIQ and hyperscience. And for many years, there was a little bit of almost like a cognitive dissonance where like everything I read and all the conversations I was having was like execs and people in the industry is like, oh, you know, cloud. And then, you know, working with certain two companies, when I spoke with them, they said, well, all our customers want to be on-prem. Actually, zero people want to be in the cloud, because, you know, they had a lot of like financial services companies, like insurance, government, you know, that type of thing. It sort of feels like the last year and a half is really when, for me, that cognitive dissonance disappeared, and suddenly I started seeing, you know, all these customers almost like all at once. And, you know, the pandemic certainly accelerated all of this, but like all those customers starting to say, okay, well, now is the time. Now we're moving those workloads and the data to the cloud. So it feels like there's been a, you know, like an inflection point of some sort that happened. And it's very anecdotal, I realize, but it is very, very clear. So like the trend is super clear. In, you know, weirdly, we're still in the early days of migration to the cloud. But I think that's starting to happen now with like the majority, including possibly the late majority, and that's only going to accelerate. So like the trend is, I think, is just not going to stop anytime soon. In fact, it's only going to accelerate. The only like slight nuance to all of this is, I think there's a little bit of a growing realization and concern around the cost of being in the cloud. And, you know, when you start in the cloud, there's actually, you save a lot of money. I mean, once you've, you know, configured your organization to actually run in the cloud and got rid of like the stuff that wasn't helping you do that. So you save a lot of money for a while. And there's a moment when, you know, it starts actually being pretty expensive. And I think in a lot of boardrooms, you know, around America or Europe, different parts of the world, I think there's been like that sudden realization around, oh, what is that line? What is that big number? and like, oh, that's AWS. I think that's a problem that's starting to come to the fore. We were early investors in Pinterest, and we started hearing this like 2 or 3, I forget, maybe 4 years ago, whenever that was. And Pinterest like built this entire strategy around like having whatever they were called, like cost captains, I think, on their teams to like using data science actually and data to predict the likely utilization and cost of cloud and all the things. That I think that's the only nuance to this whole like massive migration to the cloud. I think like people are gonna realize that like running your entire business on GCP or Azure or AWS is great, but one is at scale not as cheap as you would think. And two, you do have that vendor lock-in that's a pretty uncomfortable position to be in as every company becomes a software company and every company becomes a data company. So it'll be interesting to watch.
If I could add to one thing Matt said, right? I was talking to the CIO of a large bank, highly regulated entity. And so he's like, listen, I'm regulated. I have rules I have to comply with that says, I know where all my data is. I have it backed up. I have it protected. And the thing when it's on-premise is now split in so many different places. It's heterogeneous. So the operational complexity of knowing all where my data is, is harder when it's on-prem because it's heterogeneous. I need to know how to back it up. I need how to secure it. I need to follow all the compliance rules. So to minimize operational complexity, I'm actually going to move to the cloud. Now, the risk is I move to the cloud, it's all in one place. So if it's really exposed, I'm completely exposed. When it was like distributed, I only lost one chunk of data. And so that's why you're also seeing the explosion of spend in security and backup in the cloud is that because as people do manage the operational complexity, they want to move it all into the cloud. And more of the cloud providers are doing all the regulatory things to make it compliant, like Amazon has a HIPAA compliant cloud, there's going to be FIPS compliant cloud. So you're going to have this. But then there's a huge need for security solutions to protect it. And once people get there and they do that, there's this huge need about like, I'm going to have an ongoing OpEx number that every year is going to go up, which was in the CapEx world, I would depreciate it. So suddenly managing that cost also becomes a factor.
Just echoing that, once a quarter, we do a tech leader roundtable at GGV. And Shivnath Kunal has participated, as has Sandeep in the past. And it's usually a mix of folks, technology leaders in our portfolio and also from Global 2000s. And we pick a topic, and a recent one, we picked data, and we had all kinds of questions ready lined up to talk about DataOps and the modern stack and, centralization, single version of the truth, all this great and interesting topics to cover. And the group spent 1 hour talking about compliance and security. So, it is very top of mind for technology leaders that while there's a lot to do with data, there's also a ton of risk and a ton of rules, regulations, and compliance issues that need to be worked out before we can get to the good stuff.
So what we've learned today is cost is the reason to go to the cloud. Cost is the reason to not go to the cloud. Security is the reason to go to the cloud. Security is the reason not to go to the cloud. Makes a lot of sense. One of the topics that we touched upon, which is just the shortage of talent. How is that affecting companies' abilities to fully leverage all of this modern data stack investment and all the data science programs that are going to help them really run their business? And for this one, we'll start off with Matt again.
Yeah, so I think that's a very obvious problem, and that's only going to get worse because the rate at which we as a society produce technical people, whether they're data engineers, machine learning engineers, data scientists, is nowhere near the pace at which we will need to produce them to meet the demand. Again, because every company is becoming not just a software company, but a data company. So that basically, I think, has two consequences. One, we need products and platforms that are going to be abstracting away the complexity of a lot of those things. And in particular, one super obvious trend is the rise of the data analysts, whether they are technical data analysts, and that's a whole like DBD positioning, or not. But basically empowering people that are somewhat technical, but not engineers, to do more and more of what's needed to make that whole machinery work. And that means making it simple. That means probably a bunch of like no code, low code type solution, which I think is clearly a huge market in the future. So that's one. And the related consequence is the rise of automation. So making a lot of those technologies just work in a way that no human is required, whether they're technical or not technical doesn't matter. Like just no human, or human just if the thing doesn't work and needs to be serviced. And plenty of opportunity there, like especially AI-driven automation of systems optimization, tuning, anomaly detection, auto repair, like all the things. There's a very rich vein of opportunities there.
Thank you, Matt. Venky?
Yeah, so as Matt was talking about this, right, it reminds me that McKinsey did a study for AT&T. I think it was in the 30s, and those days they were, you actually had a physical operator who would connect the two calls. So you call into the operator connects the, and they basically said, given the volume of calls growing, we will need like 22 million operators, which was like more than most working women, because most of the original operators were women. And so it's like, how is this going to scale? And so it always reminds me, like, this is exactly what happens. The automation kicks in. There's no, and so we built the switchboard, and then suddenly you didn't need humans to connect the calls. It just automatically got connected, and that's the only way to scale. And my thing is, like, whether it's data or whether it's security, these are all going to be things that will get automated at scale. It's not going to replace humans, by the way. Humans are going to be complemented by technology that really does most of the mundane stuff, and humans will deal with the exceptions. So what happens is the mundane stuff gets done, the exceptions gets kicked to humans. And so to me, that's how, my guess is that's the only way forward in these areas, because there's no way you can build the human capital required to support it.
Love it. I love that example too. Obviously, I wasn't there for those days. Glenn, anything to add there?
Yeah. Just thinking about, like, if you think about like you split the world into managing data, right? And data, the entire world around DataOps and the data engineer, and all the challenges and complexities there. And there's definitely a labor shortage there. And then analyzing the data, getting value from it, and business analysts all the way through data scientists, and there's a shortage there. So if you think about the world in those two buckets, we have problems. We have a human problem in both, and I think that one of my colleagues said, used the phrase unbundling of the data engineer. Which is what's going on, right? If you look at all the various tasks that a data engineer would need to ultimately do to get like a well-functioning data stack in place, there just aren't enough of those people, and companies are picking off and automating various aspects of that workflow, and I think it's led to a lot of company creation, a lot of venture capital, and and a bunch of growth. But on the other side, on analyzing data and ultimately getting value from data, I think there's a lot of interesting things to be done there. Just thinking about, like, how do you make data scientists, because there aren't enough of them, more efficient? And what do they, what tools, technologies do they need? I'll plug a GGV company. We're an investor in a company called Streamlit, which is it's an open source company, and it's really popular amongst data scientists because a big problem they have is how do they productize their work, and so I just think we'll see more solutions on the management or on the analysis of data side, because we have that human capital problem in that area like we do in the infrastructure side.
think that makes a lot of sense, Glenn. Last rapid fire predictions for this industry going forward.
Massive IPOs coming in different ways. And I think, like, you know, just like every company is a software company, I would just argue every company is a data company and every company is an AI company, and data is underpinning for all of those.
Matt?
I think we still in the early innings of that whole space, which is again kind of ironic because we've been at it for 15 years and we just you know, coming out of a year and a half of just like crazy pace of like company creation and VC funding. I mean, it's a big year in data infrastructure last year. But at the same time, if you compare it to the software world, you know, there's a real argument for saying that the data world is actually under-tooled, and there's not enough options and not enough certainly mature options to do all the tasks you need to do. And there's still a lot of like figuring out stuff, you know, in a way that's far from optimal. So I think there's plenty of opportunities for founders and the VCs who love them, you know, for years to come.
Do you have any more space in your data landscape to fit in any more companies there, Matt?
That's going to become my business model. There's going to be the premium option. Like I can add categories on the margin for a fee.
There you go. Glenn, predictions for the industry.
Yeah, I'll try to be a little controversial. I totally agree with Venky. Like, lots of value creation is coming, and with Matt, there's going to be, you know, a need for him to continue to shrink the font on that on the map, because there's a lot more companies coming. But if you believe that Snowflake has an opportunity, and probably Databricks after it, to create companies that actually challenge the three cloud vendors, and I think they do, then they're going to get a lot more valuable. And I think the cloud vendors will have to think about how they respond. And data is becoming more and more central to the decision-making that companies are making about which clouds to choose. So I think Snowflake is at an advantage in some ways vis-a-vis the clouds. And I think we may, as a result, start to see some significant, as yet unseen, acquisitive behavior from the cloud vendors looking at the data space. You know, I don't have any evidence to prove that just yet, so don't anticipate that there's some big deal coming. I just think it could happen. I think, you know, next 12 to 18 months, we could see some very large deals as these guys, you know, as the AWSs and Azures and GCPs of the world realize that Snowflake is a big competitor.
It's all about controlling the center of gravity of data. That was a lot. That was a big range of topics that we covered in the last 30 minutes. Glenn, Matt, Venky, thank you again for this lively discussion and sharing all your amazing insights with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kunal.